Hey, my name is Cal Merritt. I'm 31 years old, and I work the overnight shift at a 24-hour diner off Route 9 in a small town called Harwick, Pennsylvania. It's not a town that makes it onto lists. No covered bridge. No artisan coffee. Just a Sunoco, a dollar store, 2 churches, and the diner, which is called the Millstone because the man who opened it in 1974 had a sense of humor about his own cooking. I've been working there for 6 years. I started as a line cook when I was 25 and mostly drifted into it the way you drift into anything when you're not sure what else to do. Over time, I learned the short order rhythms well enough that Dave, the owner, made me the night manager. That sounds bigger than it is. It means I open at 11, I close at 7 in the morning, I make sure the syrup dispensers are filled and the walk-in doesn't freeze over, and I handle whatever comes through the door between midnight and sunrise, which is mostly truck drivers, insomniacs, people who've just gotten off a late hospital shift, and every so often someone who is sitting in the wrong kind of quiet. My day, or my night, I suppose, goes like this. I sleep until late afternoon, wake up to an alarm I hate, eat something out of a container, drive the 12 minutes to the diner on roads that are always empty, and start the prep work around 10:30. I make the soup. I reset the coffee station. I count the drawer. I check the specials board. By 11, when Ronnie, my waitress, arrives to cover the floor, everything is ready. We don't talk much during the slow hours. We have a rhythm. She refills cups without being asked. I fire the orders without consulting her. Sometime around 4 in the morning, when there's no one in the place, she sits at the counter, and we eat whatever I've made from the leftover prep. That's usually the best part of the shift. I don't mind the nights. I mind the other 20 hours less than I used to. I have a 1-bedroom rental above a hardware store on Elm that belongs to a man named Pete, who charges me $6.50 a month and never calls unless the boiler does something alarming. I have a truck that runs, and a library card I actually use, and a habit of listening to the radio during the drive home at sunrise when the fields along Route 9 turn that specific orange that only lasts about 10 minutes. I'm not unhappy. I say that the way a man says it when he hasn't been asked. When you've been alone long enough, you stop having an opinion about it. It just becomes the shape of your life. 2 years ago, I was seeing someone, a dental hygienist named Pam, who lived in Brentwood and drove 40 minutes to see me twice a week for about 8 months before we both admitted, on the same night, with the same tired politeness, that we were keeping each other company more than we were actually choosing each other. She wasn't wrong. I wasn't wrong. We shook hands in a Panera parking lot like we were closing out a business arrangement, and that was that. The phone doesn't light up much after 9. That's not a complaint. I'm just telling you the shape of things so you understand why a Tuesday night in March, a slow, cold, nothing night, ended up being the kind of thing I still think about when I'm driving home at sunrise and the fields go orange. It was a Tuesday in the second week of March, maybe 2 in the morning, and the diner was empty except for a trucker named Dale, who came in every Wednesday on his run down from Scranton and always ordered the patty melt. Ronnie was refilling the sugar caddies at the end of the counter. I was in the back restocking the reach-in cooler with tomorrow's prep when I heard the bell above the door. I didn't come out right away. I finished stacking the containers, dried my hands on my apron, and walked out to the floor. She was in the last booth, the one in the corner by the window that looks out onto the empty parking lot. She had her back mostly to the room, which was why I almost didn't see it. She was sitting very still, with both hands wrapped around the water glass that Ronnie had already set down, and her shoulders were doing that specific thing. Not shaking, not heaving, just held very tight, very deliberate. The way a person holds themselves when they have decided they are not going to cry in public and are using every available muscle to enforce that decision. Her coat was on the seat beside her. Dark green wool, wet at the shoulders from the rain that had started outside around midnight. Her hair was dark and pulled back in a knot that had mostly come apart, and there were loose pieces of it falling forward alongside her face. She was maybe 28, maybe 30. Her cheek, the one I could see in the angle from where I stood, had the specific kind of still that comes after a long time of something. I almost went back to the kitchen. I want to be honest about that. I stood there for a moment and I thought, she wants to be left alone. The last thing she needs is a 31-year-old night manager hovering over her booth with a coffee pot and a concerned expression. Ronnie can handle it. This is not your business. Go restock the reach-in. I am not a person who inserts himself. I have made peace with being useful within a clearly defined perimeter, and the perimeter of the millstone at 2 a.m. usually does not include whatever was sitting in that booth. But then Ronnie caught my eye from across the counter and gave me a small look that said she'd already tried and been waved off. And something about the set of the woman's shoulders in the corner, the effort of it, the precise, exhausting effort of keeping yourself from coming apart in a fluorescent-lit booth at 2 a.m, made me pick up the coffee pot and walk over. I didn't say anything at first. I just poured the coffee slowly and set the pot down and stayed standing there like I was consulting the menu board behind her head. She didn't look up. Kitchen's open until 6, I said. No pressure, but the chicken soup's real. I made it tonight. She didn't answer for a moment. Then, very quietly, just the coffee is fine. Sure, I didn't leave. That was the thing I can't entirely explain. I didn't leave. I stood there for probably 15 seconds longer than was reasonable, looking at the rain on the window, and she still didn't look up, and I thought, all right. I pulled a laminated menu out of the stand at the end of the table and set it near her elbow, not in front of her, just near, and said, I'll be at the counter if you want anything, and went back. Dale left at 2:30. Ronnie started rolling silverware at the far end of the counter. I leaned against the prep station and kept my eyes on the pass through to the kitchen, mostly. Every once in a while I glanced at the corner booth. She hadn't moved, both hands still around the glass. Coffee untouched. At 3:15 I made a bowl of soup, without being asked by anyone. I put it on a small tray with a piece of bread and a folded paper napkin, and I carried it to the corner booth and set it down in front of her. On the house, I said. That was when she looked up. Her eyes were brown and very direct, and they had been crying recently, not in the last few minutes, but sometime in the last hour, and she looked at me with the specific look of someone who was trying to decide whether to be embarrassed or not. She settled on not. She looked at the soup, then back at me. I didn't ask for this, she said. Not ungrateful, just stating a fact. I know. Why did you bring it? I thought about it for a second, because it's 3 a.m. and you haven't drunk your coffee and the soup is good, and it seemed like something worth doing. She looked at me for a moment longer. Then she picked up the spoon. I went back to the counter. Her name was Nora. I didn't learn that until about 40 minutes later, when she came to the counter to pay. I told her it was just the coffee, and she told me she didn't want that, and we went back and forth about it briefly, and then she paid for the coffee and left $2 on the counter for Ronnie and said, quietly, like she was deciding to say it at the last moment, I'm Nora, by the way. Cal, I said. Thank you for the soup, Cal. Come back if you want more. She put on her dark green coat and walked out into the rain, and that was that. She came back on Thursday. Same booth. Different coat. Gray this time, a wool peacoat with the collar turned up. She came in around 2:30 and ordered coffee and the soup without being asked, and she sat there for about an hour reading something on her phone. And when she left, she paid for everything and left a tip and nodded at me on her way out like we had an existing arrangement. Which I suppose, by that point, we did. She came back the following Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that. Always between 2 and 4 in the morning. Always the corner booth. Always the soup, eventually, even if she started with just coffee. She was not chatty. She was not performing anything. She came in, sat down, ate, and left. But somewhere around the 4th visit, she started arriving a little earlier, 1:45, then 1:30, and staying a little longer. I didn't push. I have enough respect for the particular kind of quiet a person builds around themselves at 2 in the morning to leave it alone. I poured her coffee. I made the soup. I went back to whatever I was doing. But diner kitchens are not far from diner floors, and there's not a lot of noise at that hour, and I'm not entirely blind. She was working on something. A laptop she started bringing on the 3rd or 4th visit. Sometimes she typed quickly. Sometimes she sat back and stared at the screen for a long time, with her hand pressed flat on the table, like she was steadying herself. Once I saw her delete what looked like a full page of text in one motion, and then sit very still for a moment before starting over. She never looked satisfied. She always looked like she was arguing with something she couldn't quite get hold of. One night around the 5th week, during the 4 o'clock lull when Ronnie was in the back, and Dale had long since gone, and there was no one else in the place, I came out to refill her coffee, and she said, without looking up from the screen, "Do you ever have a thought that feels important, but you can't figure out how to say it, without it becoming something smaller?" I set down the coffee pot. I thought about it. "Sure," I said. I used to try to write down the drive home sometimes. Things I'd notice. I'd stop at the same gas station and write on a receipt. By the time I got home, they always looked like nothing. She looked up at that. What did they look like when you were writing them, like they mattered? She was quiet for a moment. "That's exactly it," she said. I went back to the kitchen, and she kept typing, and we didn't say anything else that night, but something about the shape of the next several weeks felt different after that. Not louder, just more open, the way a door feels different when it's been unlocked, even before anyone's touched it. Her name was Nora Delaney. She was 30 years old, and she had grown up in Harwick, which surprised me, because I didn't know her from anywhere, and Harwick is not a large place, and she'd gone away for college and stayed away for 5 years before coming back 8 months ago. She was a technical writer by trade, which she described as writing instructions for things that already work, which is harder than it sounds. She was working on something else on the side. She was deliberately vague about what it was, and I didn't press. She lived in her mother's house on Spruce Street, which was 3 blocks from the diner. Her mother had died 11 months ago, a fast and unwelcome cancer, and Nora had come back for the last 2 months of it, and never left. She said this the way you say something you have said many times, not without feeling, but with a practiced flatness that means the feeling is something you've learned to carry rather than display. "The house is hers," she said. "I keep thinking I should change things. I haven't changed anything. Maybe you don't have to change it right away." She looked at me like she was deciding whether that was a useful thing to have said. Then, maybe, she had been, before she came home, engaged. A man in Philadelphia. She mentioned it once in a way that closed the subject at the same time it opened it. I was supposed to be getting married last October, and then she changed topics, and I let her. Because some things a person mentions, not because they want to be asked about them, but because they need to say them out loud once to someone who doesn't already know the whole story. I had my own version of that, and I didn't offer it. What I offered was the soup, the coffee, the corner booth, the counter when she wanted to talk, and the kitchen when she didn't. I offered the radio on low between 4 and 5 in the morning, when the station out of Wilkes-Barre played nothing but old country songs that nobody requests anymore. I offered the fact of being there, which is not nothing at 2 in the morning when a person is in a house that belongs to someone who is gone. She came in one night in the 5th week, and she was wearing her coat over what were clearly pajamas, and her hair was down, and she sat in the corner booth, and didn't open the laptop, and didn't take out her phone, and just sat there with the coffee. I didn't say anything. I made the soup. I set it down in front of her. She ate it and looked at the window. At some point around 4 in the morning, she said, without preamble, "I keep waking up at 3 and thinking I hear her in the kitchen." I leaned on the counter. Does it feel like a bad thing when it happens? Or just a thing? She thought about it. Just a thing, she said, which almost makes it worse. Yeah. She looked at me. Your mother? Father, I said. Different situation. Years ago. She nodded. She didn't ask. I didn't explain. We sat with it the way you can sit with something like that when the other person already understands the shape of it without needing the details. She left at 5:15, and I watched her walk up the empty sidewalk in her pajamas and her green coat, 3 blocks to a house with a cold kitchen, and I stood in the diner doorway for longer than I needed to before I went back inside. There's something about a diner at that particular hour, 4 in the morning, the night crew gone, the first light still 2 hours away, that strips things down to what they actually are. There's nowhere to be, except where you are. There's nothing to perform, because there's no one watching. The fluorescent light is too honest for anything but the truth. Nora and I had a lot of conversations in that light. They were not dramatic conversations. We talked about the technical writing she did during the day, which involved writing user manuals for hospital equipment, and required a specific kind of clarity that she described as removing every word that gives the reader an excuse not to understand. We talked about Harwick, what it had been like growing up here, what it was like to come back. We talked about the drive home at sunrise. I told her about the 10 minutes of orange on Route 9, and she said she knew exactly what I meant because she used to watch it from her bedroom window as a kid. She told me about the other things she was writing, eventually in pieces. It was a novel, or something shaped like a novel, she said, though she wasn't sure it had enough plot to qualify. It was about a woman whose mother had died and who was trying to figure out what she had inherited beyond the house and the furniture. She said it sounded morbid when she described it, but it wasn't. Not really. It's more about what you keep doing after, she said. After the grief part. All the mornings that don't feel like grief exactly, but feel like something. I said that sounded like exactly what it was. She looked at me like that was a useful thing to have said. I told her about the receipts in the gas station. How I'd started doing it after my father died, and I was driving home from Harwick Regional Medical Center at 5 in the morning, and I needed somewhere to put things. How the receipts didn't hold the things I needed to say, but the act of writing them did something else. Gave the feelings a place to go, instead of circling. She listened to that carefully. She didn't say it was sad. She said, I think that's the same reason I go to a diner at 2 in the morning, instead of writing in my house. And I thought about that for a while. It was a Wednesday night in early April, 5 weeks after her first visit, when things shifted. She came in at 1:15, earlier than usual, and sat in the corner booth, and opened the laptop, but didn't type anything. I could tell from the shape of her that something had happened. Not catastrophic, just the particular weight of something that had been carried all day and needed to be set down somewhere. I made the soup without thinking about it. I brought out 2 bowls. I don't usually do that. I usually eat in the kitchen between rushes, and I carried them to the corner booth and set one in front of her and sat down across from her. She looked at the soup, and then at me. "You're eating out here? Nobody else in the place? Ronnie's on break." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she picked up her spoon. We ate in silence for a few minutes. The rain was back, soft against the window. The radio was on low, something old and steel-stringed. "My ex called today," she said, not looking up from the soup. I didn't say anything. "He's getting married," she said, "to someone from his firm. He called to tell me himself, which he thought was the decent thing to do. He might be right. I'm not sure." She paused. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It hurt in a different way, like finding out a room in your house had a different layout than you remembered. I thought about that. "Were you still expecting it to go a different way?" "No," she thought for a moment. "Maybe I was still expecting to feel something other than just over it. Like it should have been bigger. Some things are bigger when they're happening than they are later." She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up at me. "Did you lose someone?" It was direct. She had never asked directly before. I did. Not the way you did with your mother. A different kind of loss. Someone I let get away because I was too careful for too long, and then she wasn't there anymore to be careful with. I said it plainly, the way you say something that has been plain to you for a while. I thought about it for a long time. Eventually it became just a thing I knew about myself. She looked at me steadily. "What did you know?" "That I wait too long. That I talk myself out of things while they're still possible, and then I'm very good at being peaceful about it after." She was quiet for a moment. "Then I do that too," she said. "Mine was different. I went too fast. I said yes before I understood what I was saying yes to, but I think it comes from the same place." "What place?" "Not being sure anyone will stay," she said, very simply. "So you either grab it before you've thought about it, or you wait until it's gone." I didn't say anything for a long moment. The radio played. The rain came down. "I'm sorry about your mother," I said. She set down her spoon. She looked at the window for a while. Her eyes were doing the thing they'd done that first night. Not crying, but on the near side of it, held by some deliberate internal effort. I watched her, and I did not pretend I wasn't watching her, and I did not say anything about it. After a moment she looked back at me and she said, quietly, "Thank you for staying." I heard what was underneath it. I don't know if I was supposed to. I don't know if she knew it was there. But I'd been sitting in that diner at 2 and 3 and 4 in the morning for 5 weeks, and I knew by then the difference between what Nora Delaney said and what she meant. And what she meant was not just about tonight. She meant the soup she didn't ask for. She meant the counter when she wanted to talk, and the kitchen when she didn't. She meant the radio on low at 4 in the morning. She meant the fact that when she walked into a fluorescent-lit diner in her pajamas at 2 a.m., she did not have to explain herself or perform anything for anyone. I looked at her. There is a thing that happens sometimes, not often, not on purpose, where you understand something about yourself in the middle of a moment rather than after. I understood that I had been careful for a long time. I had been careful in the way I had described to her, waiting until things were no longer possible, and then being peaceful about it. And I had told myself that was just the shape I was, and there was nothing wrong with it. And sitting across from her at 4 in the morning, with empty soup bowls between us and the rain on the window, I thought, "You are doing it right now. You are watching it become a thing you were careful about." "I'm going to say something," I said, "and I'm going to say it before I think about it too much." She looked at me. I don't know what this is exactly, but I know I look for your car in the lot before I even start prep. I know the nights you don't come in feel different from the nights you do. I know that the soup is better on the nights you're here, and I don't think that's a coincidence." I paused. "I'm not asking you for anything. I just wanted to say it out loud, instead of not saying it." She was very still for a moment. "You're really something, Cal Merritt," she said. "Not really." "No," she said. "You are." She looked at me with those direct brown eyes. "I think I've been coming here because it was the one place where I didn't have to be okay. And you were the one person who didn't need me to be." She paused. I didn't understand at first why that felt like so much. I think I understand now. "What do you understand?" "That staying is a choice," she said. "People don't always make it." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Not romantic, not calculated, just placed it there, steady and decided. The way she brought her spoon to the soup every single night like it was the most natural thing in the world. We stayed like that for a while. The radio played. The rain came down outside. The diner was quiet in the way it gets at that hour, honestly. Completely quiet, and I thought, there are moments in a life that you don't make happen. You just stop getting out of the way of them. A year later, the sign above the millstone was the same. Dave hadn't fixed it in 30 years and wasn't going to start now. Ronnie had started leaving a second mug on the counter by 9:30 because she said it saved her a trip. The corner booth was just the corner booth again. Nora and I sat at the counter now, side by side on the same two stools, on the nights she came in. She still came in on the slow nights. Less often for the 2 in the morning variety, more often near the end of my shift when the first light was starting. She'd sit with coffee and work on the novel, which had gotten longer and less morbid, she said, or at least differently morbid. She'd let me read 40 pages of it in January. It was very good. I told her that. She told me I was biased. I said, probably, and also it was very good. The house on Spruce Street had one changed thing in it now. The kitchen table had 2 chairs instead of 1. Nora had bought the second one at the antique store on Oak Street and put it across from the first without saying much about it. And one morning when I came over after my shift, she made eggs, and we sat there in the morning light with coffee between us, and she said, without any particular emphasis, "I like this better." I said, "Me too." She went back to her eggs. That was the whole conversation. Pete, the landlord, has the apartment above the hardware store rented to a nursing student now. The drive on Route 9 in the morning is 12 minutes longer than it used to be. I haven't minded that. There are nights still when I pour the last of the coffee and look at the parking lot and think about the shape of things, the way you do at 4 in the morning when the world is still and honest. I think about what I told her, that I wait too long, that I talk myself out of things, and I think about how she put her hand over mine on a rainy Wednesday in April like it was the most straightforward thing in the world, and I think sometimes the shape of your life isn't the shape you were born with. Sometimes someone walks into a fluorescent lit room at 2 in the morning, not looking for anything in particular, and you pretend not to notice, and then you notice. And then, if you are lucky enough to stop being careful at the right moment, the shape becomes something you didn't know how to picture before you were already living in it. I made the soup. She stayed. I stayed. That turned out to be enough to start with.